National Public Radio, NPR, where the news is what we say is the news.
Voices blending, melodies ascending, harmony in the air. Our songs are never ending. In the barbershop we create magic. Brad and John show, yeah. It's pure classic. No instruments needed, just our vocal range. Notes flying high, it's our musical exchange. Tracy's station may try, but they can't compete. Our barbershop style, it can't be beat. Oh, the harmony of voices, so sweet. In the barbershop of life, our tunes will repeat. No need for instruments, no need for a band. Just the Brad and John show, the finest in the land.
John Combest, I ask you, have you ever heard an intro to a talk show like on Armstrong and Getty like that? How about Rush Limbaugh? You ever heard an intro like that in Rush Limbaugh?
Absolutely not, Brad. They didn't have access to our barbershop quartet.
How about Sean Hannity? Ever heard of Sean Hannity intro like that?
Yeah, it was like he did a remix where he's just barking and doing a real grovelly voice and acting exasperated, which is pretty much what you get when you listen to conservative talk radio in St. Louis too, right, Brad?
Oh, wow, John, listen to that.
No, I love them all. We're going to talk about them in A Block today, Brad. I love them all, but I mean, they're a little cranky sometimes, right?
Whoa. You going to talk about talk show people in the A Block this morning?
Well, just because they had important people on to talk about important issues, Brad.
Oh, okay. Okay, that is John Combest, C-O-M-B-E, let me try that again, C-O-M-B-E-S-T. And what's John all about?
Time for the John Combest Top 3.
Every single day of his life for the past 23 years, John puts together a list of all the important things you should know that's going on in the state of Missouri, politically, governmentally, all that kind of stuff. Puts together this long list, but we distill it down to the top 3. We bring this guy in.
I'm Casey Kasem.
And what does he do?
Now on with the countdown.
Counts them down. And John starts off with?
In third place.
Yesterday, on one of St. Louis's preeminent morning political talk radio shows, Brad, the Mark Cox Morning Show, David Stokes from the Show Me Institute was on talking about Proposition A. Now, Brad, I know a lot of times when you're driving in to the studio, you listen to Mark Cox. Did you happen to catch any of this particular one?
I did not.
Okay, so David is from the Show Me Institute, has worked there for many years. He left for a little while to go to Great Rivers Habitat and did some stuff there and then came back to Show Me Institute. Long story short, Brad, David gives background, statistical background, on what you and I talk about a lot, which is the negative effects of a minimum wage increase. Brad, you ask rhetorically the brilliant point, which is, well, if $15 is good, why not make it $25? And you know what? Let's make it 4 times better than $25 and let's make it $100 an hour.
Yeah,
why
that's
not?
what I say. Yeah, make it 100.
And so Stokes goes into one of the reasons why Stokes was on, not only to talk about the group's opposition, the Proposition A, but to point people to the Show Me Institute website, where they've done a new study of what happens in some of these municipalities and some of these states where minimum wages increased, and going through and detailing the effects it has on families. So Stokes's point, which I think is interesting, Brad, he points out that yes, for some minimum wage workers, for example, if you're a teenager and you're in high school and it's your first job, it can help you, right? Because it affects your income that particular week. But as we all know, Brad, and Stokes has the details here, it limits the number of jobs you have. Obviously, companies are more likely to give out less jobs or to hire fewer people if they have to pay a higher rate, more likely to move to McDonald's kiosks, which is one of the things that Stokes and Mark Cox talk about. And also it talks about the fact that it affects families negatively because just in general in a community, if you raise the minimum wage, you're going to have fewer jobs. So it does help a small subset of people, but in the bigger picture, it hurts people. Stokes also touches on the paid sick leave part, Brad. And I think Stokes's opposition here is philosophical, which is, why should the government be telling private employers exactly how much sick time they have to provide to employees? It's ridiculous. So one suggestion I would give too, Brad. Yesterday I pointed out when we were talking about Mark Bland's interview with Senator John Danforth, I recommend when people listen to podcasts, they listen to them at 1.25 speed. It's a little faster. If you're listening to a geriatric like John Danforth, you might want to listen to it at 1.5. The beauty of Apple Podcasts is you can go in, click transcript. If you don't want to sit and listen to 10 minutes of Mark Cox and a pre-roll and a commercial, just read the transcript. So that's my listener tip for the day, Brad.
The only problem with that is you can't read the transcript when you're driving, though, John. If you're driving down the highway, you can't read the transcript.
That's true. And, Brad, you do spend an inordinate amount of time in the car.
I do. Matter of fact, you know what? After all these years, I still love to drive, and I'm probably coming up on 3 million miles I've driven in my life. And I know people go, how in the world is that possible? Once again, come over to my parking lot. I'll show you 1 million miles in the parking lot. That's just a couple of my cars. Okay, John, first off, let me make a comment on that. I believe it's California that have it on next month's, they have all the proposition craziness in California. Yep. And I believe California has a proposition where they're now requesting $18 an hour minimum wage. And what's sort of interesting about this is there's a rumor that they don't think it's going to pass, that people are finally going, okay, this is a little bit carried away. You know what I mean? To the point where I think people are trying, and your point was well taken. As a business person, if you're sitting there and, there's an assumption that all businesses make money, that they're profitable. And sometimes if a business is marginally profitable or maybe losing money, and an example of this, Walgreens, which has announced they're closing a bunch of stores, they essentially say, okay, we're just going to cut our losses. We're going to close that place down. But your point is well taken about the aspect of, like the McDonald's we talked about, the one in Mid-Rivers Mall right there at 364 and 94 in St. Charles, St. Peter's, whatever that is right there. There's no counter anymore. You go in there and there's nobody to talk to. I mean, it's all kiosks. You can't walk up to the counter and order anymore because they've eliminated that position. And all the people in the back are, making burgers and stuff like that. It's just one of those things. And the downside on that is that I had this argument with two people this week, where they go, well, they're very pro-union, very, pro-labor, very pro, elevated minimum wage. And I say, well, $100 an hour. Well, that's ridiculous. Why is it ridiculous? You want a living wage. You don't think you can live real well on $100 an hour? You know what I'm saying? I mean,
yeah. First of all, we know that you've been besmirching unions all week, Brad.
I have not, John.
And earlier, and first of all, I would be careful because you know how those union guys are. Earlier in the week, we talked about the Irish law firm Mix O'Toole, but I heard that you've been called down to Dago Kusamanos to talk about your slanderous words.
No, John,
and your libel about unions.
My comment on this was, let me reiterate, my comment on this was, Boeing is not doing well, okay? The last thing they need is for their the machinist, to go on strike, so they're not turning out any airplanes, okay? They're already in trouble, okay? Do you kick a friend when they're down? I mean, if your next door neighbor loses his job, do you go over and you say, hey, man, as a matter of fact, the other day your dog urinated in my front lawn. I'm gonna sue you. I'm taking you to court. No, you go over to your neighbor and you say, hey, man, I heard about, you losing your job. Anything I can do to help out? Matter of fact, I got some friends that I maybe make a couple phone calls for you. That's my complaint with the unions. Boeing is in trouble. I mean, they are honestly in trouble right now. And the machinists are going like, we don't care. We want more money. And, once again, I don't understand that. And honest to God, me being, pastor in God Squad, to me, that is ungodly. When someone is down, you help them. As opposed to the comment I said that once upon a time Ray Kroc in an interview with a bunch of college kids, the question was, if your competition was in bad shape, would you help them out? And he said, if my competition was drowning, I'd stick a hose in their mouth and turn the hose on, okay? I don't agree with that. I think that's the wrong attitude. But hey, now, John, I got to tell you something. I just got a text from someone you and I both know that for some reason the streaming's up, but there's no audio. I'm going to launch you into number 2. I have to walk down the hall to the other studio to check on it. So if I don't come back right away, can you just do the thing and you can pretend you're Casey Kasem. You can go right into number 1. Is that cool? You can go and number 1, and then you just go into that. Okay, so.
The number 2 then.
Okay, I'm launching into number 2, and I'm going to walk down the hall. Okay.
Up a notch to number 2.
To listen to and watch sports over this coming weekend. We got Mizzou homecoming. It's going to be blacked out at Faroe Field. Yeah, it's a blackout homecoming day. Folks who watch sporting events might see a few fewer television commercials on Amendment 2, which is a sports betting proposition. That's according to Rudy Keller, a content creator at the Progressive Missouri Independent. Rudy does a really thorough job in all of his reporting. And in this case, he caught something. He caught the FCC broadcaster reports because Rudy tracks these, which I think is a brilliant idea to go through and track the FCC ads to kind of see where these campaigns are allocating resources, or in this case, where the campaigns are pulling resources back. And Rudy Keller discovered that the group that is opposing Amendment 2, their name is Missourians Against the Deceptive Online Gambling Amendment, really rolls off the tongue. That group canceled $1.2 million of television ads. According to Rudy, some of them had been purchased weeks ago. Now, according to Brooke Foster, she's the spokeswoman for Missourians Against the Deceptive Online Gambling Amendment. She says that they're reallocating those resources to what she's calling grassroots outreach and community conversations. So as I view this, and we really won't know until we see some of the campaign finance spending later on, but my guess is that this group would be hiring people, might have found a temporary staffing agency to go out, knock on doors, do direct voter contacts, probably phone calling, probably doing some, whether they're robocalls or paying people to actually make human phone calls against Amendment 2. And community conversations, I'm not sure what that means. That sounds like something that you don't have to put any action behind. If you say grassroots efforts, community conversations, maybe it just means dispatching more surrogates to go out and talk about why this isn't a good idea. And I don't think this is an issue of resources. I think our first inclination would be to think that the money is drying up for opposition. But as we've seen, Caesars continues to pour money into this. According to Rudy Keller, Caesars has already dumped $14.2 million into this campaign to kill Amendment 2. So fewer ads this weekend as we go into Mizzou homecoming and the NFL weekend.
I find that fascinating. I still am interested in the fact that Caesars is against this. But, you would think that, once again, you go to Las Vegas, and if you've been to Caesars Sportsbook before, it's huge. But maybe that's why they're against it.
Yeah. As I understand it, though, if you're them, maybe you think, okay, we'll dump a bunch of money into this, hopefully kill it, and then when it comes back, we'll be able to get a better deal where we actually get a piece of this. Because as I read it, Brad, they're going to be essentially cut out of all this if this passes. So why not throw your weight around? And again, gosh, when you look, I don't know off the top of my head what Caesars makes, but they can afford to dump $20 million into a campaign.
Yeah, but you know what? Here, once again, you're assuming they make money. There are a lot of companies that go, oh, man, they can make money hand over fist. And when you see their financials, you go, man, this company's just barely getting by. And I'm not saying that's the case, but, look at the expenses they've got. And by the way, maybe we should call Brooke again. She was on, what was that, 2 or 3 weeks ago we had her on? We're talking about this. Do you think would you want to have her on again and maybe explain why they're doing this?
Yeah, after we have Jack Cardetti on. We shouldn't have Brooke on twice if we don't have Jack on.
Come on. Jack's the pro, man. Jack doesn't need any help. He's got all the money behind it. Because, let's be honest, John, this is going to pass. There's no two ways about it. It's going to pass. Just like the abortion thing's going to pass.
Well, according to now what I think is interesting here, and this was my favorite quote from Brooke Foster. Brooke Foster claims that they're within, he calls it a quote, she says that it's, quote, margin of error type close. So we're really pleased to see that. Now, the last poll, which was done in August, we've talked before, Brad, SLU partners up. There's a bunch of limeys called YouGov, and SLU partners up with them. 50% of voters said they supported sports betting, and only 30% were opposed. And now Brooke Foster says that after all their campaign work and their advertising, that it's, quote, margin of error close.
Well,
so if you believe that, then good for you.
Punching buttons, listening to shows this week, I heard two different people on two different radio stations, and these were like people who knew what they were talking about, unlike you and I. No, unlike me. John knows what he's talking about. And they both said the water is very murky as far as if there will ever be any money that will actually go to education. And once again, the whole thing to me is smoke and mirrors. And you know what? If this passes, I am truly going to start escorts for education. I mean,
why wouldn't you, Brad?
I'm going to start escorts for education, and I'm going to get a cut of that. And just like Brad Bradshaw? Wasn't he the guy that was going to be the
you can make yourself, I know what your title is going to be. Tell everybody.
I'm going to be king of prostitution in the state of Missouri.
Oh, I was just going to say czar.
Yeah, was it?
Brad,
Yeah.
The other Brad Bradshaw was just going to be a czar.
Hey,
but you're going to be a king.
Kings trump czars. You know, when you're the king, you are over everything. Okay, I'm still having some issues down the hall. I'm going to put you in the number one, and I'll be back, okay?
Okay.
The number one.
Oh, it's a piece of nostalgia. Think back to the glorious year of 2020. It was February. It was March. People were starting to get the sniffles. They didn't know why. The headline from the Post-Dispatch today, Michelle Munns of the Post-Dispatch writes, COVID-19 and flu cases are down, making it the perfect time to get vaccinated. It's the perfect time to get vaccinated. Think back to 2020. Remember 2 weeks to stop the spread? Remember, shelter in place. We're all in this together. Well, it is the perfect time to get vaccinated. What do you need in the wintertime? More than you would need, I don't know, a COVID-19 vaccine. So Michelle goes through here and she details all the places that you can go. You know, it's so easy now. If you want to get your product from Moderna, Pfizer, you can just put your arm out the window. That's how easy it is. You and your fat little offspring can just put your chunky arms out the window, and some poor sap will come up and give you a jab. And you know what? The other best part of this is that we have a quote from a doctor here who says, quote, "There is very little downside to getting vaccinated, and the potential upside is it will prevent them from you ending up in the hospital." I don't know what kind of English that is. The potential upside is it will prevent them from you from ending up in the hospital. Now, Michelle Munns is a really good reporter, and as I've written before in the Missouri Times, she is the best of the bunch when it comes to COVID reporters, when it comes to health reporters. And these health reporters, let's not forget, had their heyday in 2020 and 2021. And they were doing stories about COVID. And they were fighting the ridiculous misinformation, like, I don't know, the idea that the virus came from a lab in Wuhan. What kind of outrageous right-wing conspiracy is that? And then they also had the opportunity in 2021 to tell stories about, quote, long COVID. Ooh, I have neuropathy in my foot. Yeah, that's it. Give me some sympathy. So check out the story today from Michelle Munns of the Post-Dispatch. COVID is back. We need to get vaccinated. You can find a paywall-free version on my website today.
Johnny, you're such a naysayer. I mean, the next thing you're going to tell me is you're going to tell me that the Hunter Biden laptop was actually real. Everybody knows. Everybody knows it was Russian deepfake. Come on, John, you know that, right? Okay.
And yeah, as we go into break, Brad, I would just point out I have bookmarked on my website. I don't have it up on my website today, but I have bookmarked on my computer. Our friends at Washington University did a story in 2020 about the ridiculous conspiracy that COVID came from China. Came from a lab in Wuhan. What can we do to fight that right-wing misinformation, Brad? WashU had the story What would we do without these truth sellers, these truth tellers, Brad? I said truth sellers. No, these vaccine sellers and non-truth tellers, Brad. What would we do without them?
John, and just think, within the last month, both John Kerry and Hillary Clinton came out and essentially said, there's this problem that the United States have. It's called the First Amendment, and we need to get rid of that because remember when we talked about, first it was John Kerry, then Hillary Clinton comes out, and it's like, we need to get rid of that because of dis and misinformation. Okay, once again, things that once again were, I give the example all the time, which I'm fascinated by, the ulcer thing. The doctor that discovered that ulcers really weren't caused by stress and spicy foods.
Yes.
It was a bacteria. And for years he said, guys, I'm telling you, this is not the case, until he finally injected himself with one of his patients' bacteria, and he grew the ulcers himself. And then people said, maybe this guy's got something. Now everybody knows ulcers are very curable with medicine. It's not, remember, we talked about this, the old days with Doris Day and Rock Hudson, honey, I've got my ulcers. Oh, I know your job is so hard. Here, drink some milk. The milk will cure your ulcers. Remember that crap?
I know. Well, Rock Hudson always said that he had the aid for ulcers.
John, his little double entendres. Okay, the streaming's back up. Once again, thank you, Bill Gates. The problem is our streaming computer, if I don't keep it updated to the latest update of Windows, for some crazy reason, the streaming dropped. So I just went down the hall, rebooted the computer, loaded the new Windows 10 or whatever the heck's running, that machine's running. I think it might be an 11 now. And now it's up and running. So the streaming's back up. Okay, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?